The movie opens up at a high school library where the protagonist, a young man, Yuki Hase, is searching for a book to read. After going through a number of books, he finally selects a bulky one and decides to check it out from the library. Right then, he finds a library card belonging to a student named Kaori Fujimiya. Yuki shows the card to his friend and issues the book to the same card. Following this, he starts smelling the card in a very unusual fashion, as if it is emitting a nice fragrance. While he is doing so, a beautiful girl to whom the card belongs enters the library. She immediately snatches it back before walking away. After school is over, Yuki gets on the metro to return home. Surprisingly, Kaori is also there, but she has yet to notice Yuki nearby. After a while, he falls asleep due to fatigue and misses his station. When Yuki wakes up, he realizes his mistake and immediately gets off at the next station. In the process, he leaves his book inside the train. Fortunately, Kaori notices the book and returns it to him right before the automatic doors close. The following day, Yuki goes to school and learns that the students have been reshuffled into different sections. When he tries to find his class, he notices Kaori's name on the same list and becomes very excited. He then rushes to the class and finds Kaori already sitting there. Without wasting any time, Yuki takes a seat nearby her and keeps on looking at her with a smile on his face. After their classes are over, Yuki approaches Kaori and thanks her for returning his book at the station. Surprisingly, she doesn't say a word and keeps on walking. A persistent Yuki follows her and mentions that he really wants to be friends with her. But again, Kaori ignores him and walks away, saying she can't make friends. With her rude behavior, Yuki assumes that Kaori is just a reserved girl who hates being with others. But despite this, he keeps on following her whenever he gets a chance. One day during lunchtime, Yuki follows Kaori to the rooftop of the school building. He sits beside her, but she immediately stands up and walks away. Yuki tries to stop her, but ends up spilling his lunchbox when Kaori jerks her hand away from him. This makes her sad, so she hands over her lunchbox to Yuki. However, she does not sit with him to share it. Later in the evening, Yuki takes out a big book and draws an anime character of Kaori. Here, we learn that although Yuki is not good at his studies, he is very interested in drawing and aspires to be a manga artist in the future. He then remembers his meeting with Kaori and starts drawing on the blank pages of the book. In the following days, Yuki keeps on trying to get closer to Kaori, but to no avail. Instead, she tells him that she's not supposed to make friends and asks him to stay away from her. All this is being observed by their class teacher, so he asks Yuki to meet him after school. At the end of the day, while all the students are preparing to return home, Yuki meets his teacher in the office. The latter finally reveals what's going on. It turns out Kaori is suffering from dissociative amnesia, because of which she forgets everything at the end of the week. The only people she remembers are her parents. Hearing all this, Yuki becomes saddened, but he does not stop approaching Kaori for friendship. A few months pass by, and now Yuki and his classmates are in the second year of their high school study. One day during history class, the teacher tells them that the best way to remember their past memories and relive them to the fullest is by writing them down in a diary and reading them time and again. As soon as Yuki hears this, he deduces that Kaori can also do the same to improve her memory. He then immediately goes to a bookstore and buys 2 diaries, one for himself and the other for Kaori. In the next scene, Yuki meets Kaori on the rooftop and hands her the diary that he recently bought. He also explains that they need to record everything they do this week and exchange it at the end. At first, Kaori hesitates, but after thinking about it for a while, she agrees. She takes the diary, but does not tell her mother about it. On her way back home, Kaori meets her old friend Mayu, but fails to recognize her. To defuse the awkward situation, her mother tells Mayu that they are in a hurry before walking away. One night when Kaori is reading Yuki's diary, she pulls out a box from her cupboard and finds a photograph, including Mayu. Despite this, she remembers nothing and puts it back. Right then, her mother enters the room, and when she finds her writing in a diary, she suggests Kaori avoid interacting with people as it will directly affect her health. The following day, Kaori meets Yuki and returns the diary. She also tells him that she cannot continue it anymore and apologizes to him. To help Yuki understand her situation, she explains everything about her peculiar health condition. However, Yuki is still adamant about helping her. Seeing his dedication and care for her, Kaori accepts the diary again. On reaching home, she reads the diary where Yuki has written about how they met and what they did in their first week. This makes her happy, and she feels like, despite her abnormal mental condition, there is someone who really cares for her. Kaori then writes an apology to Yuki for ignoring him every time they met. The The latter is also over the moon to read a response, and from this day onwards, the two start exchanging their diaries regularly. Kaori takes the diary with her on Fridays so that she can remember the details from Yuki before returning to school on Mondays. One day, Yuki's friends make a plan to visit Sky Lantern Festival and ask Kaori to join them. Surprisingly, Kaori, who loves to stay alone, agrees to go with them. Yuki talks to her and asks her if she really wants to come to the festival, and Kaori replies with a yes. Right then, we see a new transfer student, Kuso, staring at Kaori and getting annoyed when she walks away without addressing him. The scene then shifts to the festival where Yuki and Kaori are spending some quality time. Together, they watch the lanterns flying in the sky and become happy. After a while, Kuso, who's also at the festival, spots Kaori and calls her a traitor. Hearing this, the latter gets some visions about her past and starts getting a headache. Eventually, she loses consciousness and falls to the floor. Wasting no time, Yuki rushes her to the hospital and waits for her to regain consciousness. However, when she finally does, she fails to recognize him. This upsets Yuki, so he decides to leave the hospital, but Kaori's dad stops him. He thanks Yuki for taking care of his daughter and also reveals her entire story. It turns out that Kaori got into a severe accident when she was in her previous school, and since then, she has been dealing with memory problems. Because of this incident, the doctor suggests Yuki refrain from interacting with other people. Saying this, Kaori's dad asks Yuki to stay away from her. However, Yuki replies that he will give up on Kaori only if she says that she is not interested in him. In the next scene, Kaori returns home after getting discharged from the hospital, and Yuki gets back to work to trying to befriend her. This time, Kaori's mother helps Yuki and expresses her gratitude for what he is doing for their daughter. While the whole class is preparing for their annual festival, Kuso also gets moved into Yuki and Kaori's class. Because of the preparations, students are allowed to stay at the school till late at night, and using this opportunity, Yuki spends quality time with Kaori, telling her that he likes her. After he leaves, Kuso approaches Kaori and accuses her of ignoring him as she did a few years before. He also accuses her of not coming to visit him on the scheduled night. Kaori tries to reply to him, but suddenly gets a vision of her past and falls to the floor. However, she states that she is all right and asks Kuso to leave. The following day is the day of the festival. Surprisingly, Mayu arrived at the school to meet Kaori. Sometime later, we see Kaori, Yuki, Kuso, and Mayu on the rooftop. Without wasting any time, Mayu reveals that she is the reason for Kaori's memory loss and apologizes to her. The scene then flashes back to the past where Kaori, Kuso, and Mayu used to study at the same school. Before transferring to a new school, Kuso expresses his love for Kaori and also invites her to meet him at the festival late at night. Obliging to the request, Kaori arrives at the festival, but suddenly gets noticed by Mayu and her group, who stop her from meeting Kuso. Embarrassed, Kaori runs back home, but sadly gets hit by a car midway. This is the cause of her memory problems. Back to the present, Kuso asks Mayu to leave while Yuki is trying to comfort Kaori. Right then, Kaori cries and tells Yuki that she still has feelings for Kuso and wants to see him. This devastates Yuki, but he says nothing and keeps on smiling. Rather, he meets Kuso and tells him that Kaori has remembered him. Later, Yuki returns to the art room and burns everything that he drew for Kaori, even the diaries. He tells his friend that he can never take the place of someone that Kaori remembers permanently before walking away. The whole year passes by, and during their final year, Yuki tries to approach Kaori, but steps back after seeing her with Kuso. However, a few months later, he respectfully rejects his other friend Saki's confession of love for him by saying that he only likes one girl, and that is Kaori. In the next scene, Yuki asks one of his friends who works in the library to return a book for him. When his friend agrees to do so, Yuki hands him the big book that he checked out at the beginning of the movie. Next, during the graduation, everyone starts writing in each other's journals, and Yuki also asks Kaori to do the same. Though Kaori doesn't recognize him, she writes a congratulatory message in his diary. At the same time, she is called to the library to return a book. It turns out to be the same big book that Yuki had checked out with her membership card a year earlier. Luckily, Yuki's friend is also there, and he immediately returns the book on Kaori's behalf. After a while, she starts going through the pages and notices a beautifully drawn story about how she and Yuki met for the first time. She also reads about the lovely moments they shared together. This finally makes her remember Yuki, so she hurries out of the library to meet him. In the last scene, Kaori searches for Yuki around the school and finally finds him sitting at the side of an empty road. She then approaches him and apologizes for troubling him and rejecting him every time he proposed to be her friend. The movie ends with Kaori proposing a friendship and Yuki accepting it with a smile on his face.